under which patient records must be made available to the board. Training requirements, so the term training in the rules refers to information that's given to dispensary employees, establishes baseline training for dispensary employees. That training must include, among other things, ORS training, seed-to-sale training, training on forms and methods of administration. And there's also an 8-hour training requirement for dispensary employees each year. Dispensaries are going to be required to maintain their own internal inventory control system. And this is really a business solution that's separated apart from the regulatory solution that you see in the seed-to-sale tracking system. It's going to be required, this rule requires dispensaries to maintain that inventory control system. It details the required compatibility of that system with state systems and the necessary functionality. An internal inventory system will operate as the official dispensing record for the dispensary. And then a reconciling with the internal system and state system is required on a weekly basis. Recall procedures. This rule requires dispensaries to establish policies related to the mandatory and voluntary recall of medical marijuana, and it includes notification to patients, caregivers, and boards. Dispensaries must put their mandatory procedures into action upon notice from either the board or the Department of Commerce. And I thought that piece was important because if Commerce learns, because of its oversight of cultivators and processors, of a serious adverse health reaction related to a product that's they know has been dispensed, I want them to immediately be able to act to get that product out of the hands of patients and caregivers. And then there's prohibitions. These are general prohibitions related to dispensaries. And among the prohibited items are drive-through windows and home delivery. Dispensary access. This next rule details who has access to the following areas: the dispensary department, that's patients, caregivers, employees, and restricted access areas. And those are necessary dispensary employees as determined by the dispensary. We're leaving that up to the discretion of the dispensary, knowing that if they're a little bit different model than, say, cultivators or processors. All others must generally be authorized by the board and be under supervision while on the premises. The advertising, marketing, and signage for dispensaries is set forth next. This requires board approval of an advertisement before it's disseminated to the public, prohibits specific content as well as distribution media. Advertisements cannot include cartoon characters, and it cannot target minors. This establishes restrictions on the placement and appearance of advertisements, and places restrictions on the dispensary's use of social media and web activity. And the next rule starts our enforcement and compliance section. The first two rules in this section provides the scope of the board's enforcement. They establish the scope of inspections, and they provide for both announced and unannounced inspections. The following two rules establish, first, the grounds for discipline, so under which both dispensary entities and dispensary employees may be subject to discipline. And it also provides when due process and how due process will be implemented in response to the commission of a prohibited activity. The next rule is exclusive to employee licenses, and it establishes when a dispensary employee license may be suspended without a hearing. This is very similar to what you'll see with a pharmacist. This is how a pharmacist's license can be suspended without a hearing, generally speaking. And it establishes substance abuse or addiction. Continuing to operate as a dispensary employee presents an immediate and serious harm to oneself or others upon notification of a felony drug conviction. And then this last one is what's been added, upon notification of an arrest or conviction of a disqualifying offense. And the following rule addresses a summary suspension in the case of a dispensary that's been licensed. And summary suspension or suspension without a hearing is limited to grounds that when a continual operation as a dispensary presents an immediate and serious harm to others. There's a rule related to the failure to properly store marijuana. This provides notice that failure to properly store marijuana may subject products to being placed under seal. And upon reasonable suspicion that improper products are being dispensed, products may be confiscated and submitted to a testing lab. Next, our next rule addresses the restoration of license from discipline. And generally speaking, the license will be restored once all conditions precedent have been met. Interagency cooperation is one that you've seen with the cultivator rules. And this is just simply that notice is going to be provided to the Department of Commerce, the Medical Board, and law enforcement when a dispensary license is suspended or revoked. And then variances. This rule authorizes the granting of variances at the board's discretion if listed criteria are met. It allows for flexibility when encountering unpredictable fact patterns. When I say unpredictable fact patterns, things that we were not aware of, we couldn't understand occur today down the road. And then finally, we have fee schedules. This establishes fees for the applications, certifications of certificates of operation, renewals, lost, destroyed, stolen certificates, and employee identification cards. Renewal for dispensaries is every 2 years. The cost for an employee, a support employee, again, is $100. Key employees is $250, and associate key employees is $500. And then for dispensaries themselves, the application fee is going to be $500 or $5,000, pardon me, and the biannual license fee for a dispensary will be $80,000.
I'm out of breath. I know we're going to cover seed to sale a little bit later in the meeting today, before we can understand what that really means, and we'll talk, because that was referenced several times. I think maybe we'll move through with this. So I'd like to go ahead and take the same process we had, understanding that this is a very granular rule set, so let's be clear on that. There's a lot of this stuff that is just, it's modeled a lot after the pharmacy rules, although these are not pharmacies. There's a lot of that language in there. So some of this is just a matter of process. I don't want to get bogged down in that, but I do like to take some comments around some of these sections as we walk through them. So if we'll kind of work our way back through to the beginning, again, unless there's objection, I think we'll set the definitions aside. A lot of these are common definitional set. Let's walk all the way back to 6-2-1, and we'll just kind of take this one section at a time to see if you have questions. If there's anything that needs to be further clarified based upon the summary review that Aaron already has given us. So I'm taking us back to the application process. Any questions at this point from the committee on what you see before you about that, what that process might look like?
That's right at the number 40. I was incorrect.
So that's in our provisional license rule, and the number 4
was not.
Oh, it's fine. I anticipated it. It's fine. So, what we did is we did look at other states, and while we were benchmarking with other states, what we see is it takes time to develop some of these programs. Because of that, we are starting with a conservative approach. So we're looking at the first 2 years of this program right now. And after that, we have tried to draft the rules in a way that's going to allow us to be flexible so that if in 2 years we need to expand the number 40, we will, but we're going to do this in a systematic and methodical way.
Can I follow up? We have 88 counties in Ohio, don't we? So that's not even 1 or 2 counties. Okay.
So following up on that, clearly 2 parts. The first is you looked in benchmarking with other states. Can you tell me what those states were?
We looked at the most recent states that had medical marijuana programs in operation for at least 2 years. I don't have that list in front of me, but I can get it shown.
So, the second part then, clearly you're estimating within those first 2 years to survey a certain patient population. In determining the number of choosing 40, you were looking at a certain patient population to serve in those first 2 years. What would that patient population be?
We don't have, so when we're looking at this, these are, everything's a rough estimate. And what we know is that no matter what number we guess today, that number is going to be wrong. No other state has gotten it right yet. And we don't pretend to be the state that's going to be able to do that. But based on the ranges that we see, 40 would be an appropriate number.
So was there an expectation of the number of patients that a dispensary can handle under these rules?
When we talk to dispensaries generally, the number of patients, and again, patients per dispensary was something that I know that Kurt wanted to talk about also. But the floor level for a dispensary, the number of patients needed to support a dispensary was between 300 and 600. That's the range we heard when we talked to industry experts.
Extrapolating those numbers, then obviously 40 times 600, that's a pretty small number.
And that's the floor for them. So that's the minimum number they would need to be sustainable.
Other questions or comments in this application process section?
I could follow up again with the same line of thinking. If I think of all the different diagnoses that are available, was there any look at the prevalence of those diagnoses in Ohio relative to the percentage? If you thought that 10% of people with those diagnoses might need access to this, how those numbers would be?
We've done some research into that realm. When you look from, it's hard to extrapolate those numbers back. We have taken.
We don't have prevalence data on diagnoses in Ohio?
On diagnoses in Ohio, but how many of those patients would be interested in?
No, we wouldn't know that.
That
We'd
does
have
that.
to guesstimate a percentage, and probably estimate even low. I still think it would be high numbers.
So we don't have that information of how many people would want to do that. I mean, depending on what circle you travel in, everyone thinks everybody in the world would want it, and then in the other circle that you travel in, you go, there is no way in this world I would do that. We have conventional medicine that we know what it's going to do, we know what the side effects are, we know how it's going to interact with other medications. So it's, excuse my phrase, but it's a crapshoot. I mean, no one really knows what the numbers are going to be. So I think you're right, we start out conservatively and see what it is. The worst is to build up all these dispensaries and end up with dispensaries that are not doing anything because there's nobody there to do that, to do it. And nor do I want to get, and this is later on in the thing, nor would I want us to get into a situation where we're starting to advertise and advocate for people to go away from medical procedures and strategies that seem to be working and move them into one that's not working. I think that's irresponsible. So, and that's where you're changing mind shift. So, I agree with what you're saying. We need to do this. Certainly.
I find that when you were talking about different 40 and 88 counties, and maybe there wouldn't be enough dispensaries to meet the demand. I think if you flood the market with all these dispensaries, or if you have, if people have to make a little bit of an effort to get to those places, and the dispensaries are making a profit and they're not worried about the floor, they follow the rules. When you flood the market with all these dispensaries and nobody's hitting their minimum, then they start breaking the rules to make money.
I think that's an excellent point, and I think it touches upon the concept of 600 patients being able to be sustainable for an individual dispensary. I can tell you under this type of regulatory framework, and one that is certainly, as we can see, wrought with a lot of fees that are to be borne by the business operator and not necessarily necessarily a system that's propped up by taxation to the patient. The concern about being able to manage profitability levels that would guard against the things you're concerned about with either leakage to the black market and or a failed infrastructure that has created instability in other states. I would be very surprised under this regulatory structure that a dispensary could survive with serving just 600 patients. And I'd be very, very interested in the metrics on that and what the numbers look like. And to address Marcy's comments specifically, I think the concern in saying that we would be driving people away from conventional medicine that's working to a approach that doesn't work is, obviously wrought with sort of stigma that has. That this state has worked very hard to fight against in creating this program in the first place. So the idea of approaching it from that standpoint, whether it's advertising or whether it is in some of the underlying fundamentals of the system, is very concerning to my patient.